In a world obsessed with perfection, spoken, overweight, and invisible even in a crowded room, every day was a quiet war and the battlefield was his reflection. Then, one sleepless night, reality broke. He woke up inside a body that wasn't his tall, flawless, and dangerously beautiful. The kind of beauty that demanded attention, the kind of body that made the world bow, without question. But beauty, he soon learned, was its own curse. Because when he looked into the mirror, he didn't see himself. He saw a stranger smiling back. By day, he lived adored and admired. By night, he returned to his old self, hiding in the shadows of his own existence. Park Hyung-suk awoke to silence, not the kind that comforts, but the kind that hums with wrongness. The air in his room felt heavier, charged with something unfamiliar. As he stirred, his surroundings seemed to have subtly warped overnight. The ceiling loomed closer than it should have, the sink appeared shorter, and even the scent of the room, the faint mix of detergent and sweat, felt foreign, as if it belonged to someone else's life. Then he saw him in the mirror. A stranger was staring back at him, tall, refined, and almost unreal. The boy in the reflection had smooth skin, sharp features, and a body sculpted as though it had been carved from light and discipline. For a fleeting heartbeat, Hyung-suk thought he was still dreaming. But dreams didn't breathe this deeply, didn't pulse with such clarity. The reflection blinked when he did. It was him, and yet not him. Memories came crashing in like a tide. Yesterday's laughter, yesterday's shame. The echoes of mockery still clawed at his chest. He had been the boy everyone ignored until they needed someone to break. Overweight, awkward, easy to humiliate. They had forced him to bark like an animal, while the class howled in delight, their cruelty as casual as breathing. He remembered the heat of humiliation burning through his face, the sting of spit on his cheek, the way his throat tightened as he tried to laugh along so they'd stop. They never did. At home, his mother's voice had been the only safe place left. She was tired, bone-deep tired, but her love never faltered. Every bruise he tried to hide, she saw. Every forced smile she felt. When he asked to transfer schools, her hesitation was brief, but her eyes told the truth. She feared the world would simply find new ways to hurt him. Still, she agreed. A new start, that's what she called it. A new city, a new school. A new chance to disappear and begin again. But the world had shifted before he could even step into that promise. When he had fallen asleep, he had been heavy with exhaustion and bitterness. When he woke, he was this, a perfect body, glowing with effortless confidence. His voice sounded alien in his throat, deeper, steadier, like someone used to being heard. His hands no longer trembled. His reflection no longer pitied him. For the first time, he looked at himself and saw something impossible. Admiration. He wanted to believe it was a dream, a cruel trick of his imagination, but the sensation of strength in his limbs felt too real. Every movement was different. Every glance in the mirror whispered temptation. Outside, the world looked brighter. The morning light caught on glass and skin, on the motion of people who belonged to themselves. Hyung-suk walked among them, and for once, he wasn't invisible. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. He caught the flicker of admiration in strangers' eyes, and the thrill of it sank into his bones like fire. But life never gave without taking something in return. Later that day, a small accident, a shoulder bump into a passing girl, shattered the illusion of perfection. Her boyfriend appeared from nowhere, anger flaring, mistaking him for a threat. Words turned sharp, then fists sharper. A crowd gathered, phones lifted, faces hungry for drama. Hyung-suk's pulse roared in his ears. He fought back instinctively, his body moving with power he didn't understand. For the first time, he wasn't the victim. Then darkness. When his eyes fluttered open again, he was back in the old body, the heavy one, slow and suffocating. Panic seized him. He stumbled to the mirror, his reflection mocking him with the truth. Gone was the perfect stranger. Only the old Park Hyung-suk stared back, breath trembling, heart sinking. Two bodies, two realities, both his. He didn't know how or why, only that when one body slept, the other awakened. It was as if his soul drifted between two versions of existence, one cursed, one divine. And with that strange gift came a question that haunted him more than fear. What will I become now that I can be anyone? The next morning, as he walked into his new school in the beautiful body, the hallway fell silent. Whispers trailed behind him like ripples on water. Every step echoed with the weight of rebirth. The students' eyes followed him, curiosity, admiration, envy, the same emotions that once belonged to others, now bent toward him. For the first time, Park Hyung-suk understood the quiet, magnetic power of beauty. It was not just a face, it was armor, authority, control. The boy who once hid from the world now commanded it without saying a word. And yet, deep within, a shadow stirred the old self, watching silently from beneath the surface, wondering how long this illusion could last and what price this miracle would demand. Because perfection, he would soon learn, always hides a cost. The boy who was once invisible had become unforgettable, but in the mirror of beauty and pain, something darker was waiting to wake. Park Hyung-suk's morning began like any other. Fluorescent lights, a classroom full of strangers, the uneasy hum of a school settling into routine. Yet the room felt different, charged, like a stage before the curtain lifts. Heads turned as if pulled by an invisible magnet toward a tall, impossibly well-formed figure who had just entered. Whispers spread like spilled ink, curiosity swelling into fascination. Students adjusted their seats, studied him as if trying to decode a painting. Among them, a single internal voice, a naked, urgent awareness, raced to keep two lives from colliding. The new boy's presence rearranged everything. Where before there had been the usual cliques and small cruelties, now admiration and gossipy speculation filled the gaps. Girls clustered, camera phones poised. Boys watched with a mix of envy and calculation. Teachers tried to maintain order, but the tension threaded through the lesson. In a vocational high school, where each corridor marked a future trade, fashion, dance, applied music, the arrival of someone who looked like he belonged on a billboard felt like an intrusion and a promise at once. He drifted into a fashion design classroom, an unsuitable runway transplanted into a place meant for learning stitches and sketches. The rhythm of the room shifted, teachers' instructions turning into a distant metronome behind the students' eager murmurs. Inside that borrowed body, another consciousness fought a private panic. Sleep was the only bridge between two selves, and every open eyelid threatened exposure. The waking life of the tall, handsome shell required strict performance, the correct stride, the measured turns, the practiced nonchalance. When the body faltered, misstepping through exhaustion or dropping into a nap, anxiety flared. The other self might be unable to wake on its own. Both lives were cursed to balance on the thin edge of slumber. Opportunity arrived in an unexpected, ordinary place, a convenience store with harsh lights and a humming cooler. A manager's casual question about hiring became a lifeline. The idea of a part-time job sparked visions of quick cash, autonomy, and the slightly ridiculous hope that working nights paid the rent for two existences. But the work carried conditions that exposed the practical gulf between the two lives: IDs that didn't match, requirements that assumed a single, steady identity, and customer interactions that could reveal too much. A cigarette brand quiz reduced the situation to absurdity, an inventory of names the new life was expected to recite on demand. Yet the manager, amused and unconvinced, half-promised a chance, leaving the protagonist dangling between relief and suspicion. The street outside the store was noisier than the classroom, populated by the same small cruelties and rivalries that governed teenage hierarchies. A familiar group of thugs re-emerged, swaggering and vicious in equal measure. They carried the careless cruelty of boys who convinced themselves they were men, a naked humiliation of a bruised kid, a photograph snapped as proof, a display meant to erase shame by passing it around like a trophy. The mob's laughter and leering cameras made privacy a relic. The whole act felt like a cultural microscope focused on the weak. Those who watched were complicit even when discomfort flickered across their faces. Somewhere in the crowd, a boxer's fist blurred into a single, impossible motion, so clean and fast that some observers swore they saw nothing but a flash. A knockout followed, and the school's social ledger updated itself in real time. Reputation, like currency, shifted hands. Conflict, when it came, arrived with a peculiar clarity. A fight that began as posturing and bravado revealed unexpected skill. A boy who didn't merely trade blows, but read almost reflexively the intent in another's muscles. What looked like a raw brawl revealed layers of training, of history carved into posture and breath. Observers who had once dismissed the newcomer as only pretty now calculated a different danger. The rhythm of punches exposed more than muscle memory. It suggested secrets, a past that had hardened into a dangerous competence. Back home, the stakes became painfully concrete. Phone calls with a worried mother, the thin comfort of ordinary domestic concern, contrasted with the thinness of cash counted at the end of a shift. Money, always precarious, felt doubly urgent when two bodies split a single life's expenses. Images the thugs had used to silence and shame surfaced in the most ordinary places: peers, classmates, the shrink-wrapped cruelty of viral humiliation. The revelation that someone had been photographed naked after a beating tightened the room like a fist. Shame multiplied into the social currency of gossip. Even those who wanted to help found themselves immobilized by fear. Calling it in might invite retaliation. Doing nothing felt like another betrayal. Underneath all this, a quieter terror threaded through each scene. The double life, the sleepy, desperate effort to switch between bodies, the strategy of forcing an unresponsive self awake made every small event combustible. A careless glance could unravel anonymity, a misread identity could cost a job, or worse. The protagonist's interior was a field of fragile mechanisms: when to sleep, how to keep the other self from being discovered, how to move through a world designed for one coherent identity. Survival meant improvising rules and keeping secrets from people who should have been allies. By the end of the day, the school had reasserted its hierarchy, but the new order felt tentative. Popularity and danger had found a way to coexist around the tall newcomer. The thugs had reminded everyone of how, quickly, power could be weaponized. The convenience store promise hung in the air, a small, practical hope tangled with the risk of exposure. And somewhere between the classroom's rehearsed strolls and the alley's blunt violence, Park Hyung-suk continued to learn how to walk in two lives: measured, watchful, and, forever, balancing the cost of being seen. The morning sun filtered through the classroom windows as students filed in, laughing and chatting, unaware of the quiet storm brewing inside one boy's mind. Park Hyung-suk could still feel the stares following him, admiring, curious, sometimes even reverent. It was strange how the world shifted overnight. The same people who once avoided his gaze now couldn't seem to look away. The handsome face he wore drew attention like a magnet, yet deep inside, he was still the boy they used to mock. Every glance reminded him of the cruel difference between his two bodies, one adored, the other forgotten. But the illusion of perfection didn't last long. Trouble stirred when a group of students noticed him and began whispering among themselves, their eyes gleaming with mischief. Phones came out, pictures were taken, and before long, someone suggested turning humiliation into entertainment. They wanted a fight, a cruel little game to decide who was stronger, who was worth keeping around. The laughter stopped when a tall, muscular student appeared: Vasco, the quiet protector known throughout the school. His presence shifted the atmosphere instantly. Though feared by many, he stood for justice, never letting bullies have their way. When he saw what was happening, he stepped forward, without hesitation. The tension cracked like thunder as he faced the crowd. What followed was a blur. A single moment of raw strength that silenced everyone. Vasco's power wasn't just physical, it was moral. Even Hyung-suk couldn't look away. After the scuffle, a brief encounter revealed a softer side of the fierce student. Vasco offered Hyung-suk his earbuds, spoke kindly, and even recognized him, or thought he did. Their awkward conversation hinted at something new, a fragile connection forming between two very different boys. Rumors about Vasco spread through the day, about how he was the leader of the Burn Knuckle Gang, how he was rough but kind-hearted, a protector of the weak. Yet Hyung-suk couldn't shake the unease building in his chest. His double life was getting harder to manage, especially when everyone treated his new body like a gift from the heavens. Later, he found himself among classmates who invited him to hang out, a rare chance to feel normal. But the evening took an uncomfortable turn. Drinks were poured, jokes made, and the line between friendship and manipulation blurred quickly. The laughter around the table felt heavy, forced. Beneath the surface, there was jealousy, rivalry, and the scent of danger. The girls fought for attention, the boys tested one another's strength, and Hyung-suk's nerves frayed as the alcohol flowed. Then, darkness, the weight of sleep, pulling him under. When his eyes opened again, the world had shifted once more. He was back in his old body. Panic hit like a wave. Had his other self vanished? No, both bodies still existed. Two versions of him living separate lives that could collide at any moment. Late that night, he stumbled upon the same group again, but this time as the overweight Hyung-suk. They didn't recognize him at first, or maybe they just didn't care. Their cruelty returned in full force. One boy toyed with him like a plaything, teaching him a boxing stance as if mocking his weakness. Yet, buried within that humiliation was something else: determination. Hyung-suk mimicked the moves silently, feeling the shift of his weight, the rhythm of his breath. For the first time, he began to understand strength not as something you inherit, but something you earn. Meanwhile, Vasco's reputation continued to grow. His punches broke records, his confidence unmatched. Students admired him, some even envied him. But beneath that strength, there was sincerity. He fought for what was right, even when the world called him reckless. The next day, Hyung-suk woke up once more in his beautiful body, exhausted but relieved. He went to school, pretending everything was fine. When he met the timid boy, Pak Jo, he remembered the cruelty he'd once endured and saw in him a reflection of his old self. Against all expectations, he sat beside him. The cafeteria fell silent. Whispers rippled through the air. The handsome boy everyone adored was now sitting with the class outcast. outcast. But for Hyung-suk, it wasn't about status anymore. It was about something far deeper, seeing the truth of who he was and who he could become. As the day ended, his two lives continued to drift apart, one shining in the spotlight, the other walking quietly in the shadows. And somewhere between them, Park Hyung-suk began to realize that true strength wasn't in the body he woke up in, but in the heart that carried both. Morning light filtered weakly through the narrow, cramped apartment, casting pale stripes across the worn floorboards. The hum of the city outside seeped in through thin windows, blending with the soft, uneven rhythm of sleep. The air was tinged with the faint scent of old wood, detergent, and a lingering hint of last night's food. The space felt fragile, almost suspended between peace and anticipation, until the door creaked softly, breaking the fragile quiet. A woman appeared in the doorway, her figure hesitant, shoulders slightly hunched from fatigue. Her tired eyes scanned the room, wary, as if expecting something she couldn't name. In her hands, she held a paper bag of home-cooked food, the aroma faint but comforting, a mixture of savory broth, steamed rice, and something sweet tucked in the corners. Her gaze fell on a stranger, a tall, impossibly handsome young man, whose presence seemed out of place amid the modest clutter. For a heartbeat, confusion flickered across her face. She wondered if she had mistakenly entered the wrong apartment. The young man's calm, polite smile carried an almost unnatural serenity. His voice, soft and measured, explained that he was her son's friend and roommate. Slowly, tension loosened in her shoulders, but her heart remained guarded. Her eyes drifted toward the bed, where Hyung-seok slept, fragile and small, tangled in rumpled sheets. The boy looked peaceful, almost vulnerable, yet there was a subtle strength in the stillness of his breathing, a stark contrast to the boy she remembered, once timid and bullied, once broken by the cruelty of others. The handsome visitor spoke gently about Hyung-seok's life, mentioning his job at a late-night convenience store. The mother's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Her boy, once unable to stand his own shadow, now worked hard to support himself. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back, forcing a smile that carried both relief and lingering pain. Later, she suggested they go to a nearby cafe. The scent of roasted coffee beans hit her first, warm and bittersweet, a stark contrast to the stark fluorescent light of the apartment. She hesitated, startled by the menu prices, and ordered only a glass of water, her cheeks coloring with embarrassment. The young man insisted on an Americano. She tried a sip, the bitterness cutting through her hesitation, the warmth lingering like an unfamiliar comfort. A nervous laugh escaped her, a sound she hadn't realized she had lost, and she thought of her son, imagining him savoring such a moment. When she, finally, asked his name, the words froze in her throat. Hyung-seok, he replied. The name mirrored her son's, and her heart twisted with disbelief. The resemblance was uncanny, the gentle curve of the lips, the softness in the eyes, the subtle tilt of the head. For a fleeting second, she felt as if she were speaking to her son again, yet in a form she could barely recognize. She shared memories of her child's childhood, his bright laughter, his unpolished talent for singing, the cruelty he endured silently. Her voice trembled, weighted with guilt. Guilt for the moments she had been too preoccupied to see his suffering. He listened in quiet shame, guilt knotting tight in his chest. After leaving the cafe, the mother began gathering discarded cardboard boxes from a nearby alley. Her hands, rough and trembling with exhaustion, moved with meticulous care, tying bundles with fraying twine. She explained that this was her side work, a way to earn a little extra for her son. Her smile was resolute, yet beneath it lingered the raw ache of weariness. She pressed a few bills into the young man's hand, ostensibly payment for the coffee, but her gaze lingered with an unspoken plea. Stay close to my son, protect him in ways I cannot. Guilt and confusion churned inside the young man afterward. His double life, the secret that defined him, suddenly felt heavier, more oppressive. Before he could process it, a large, foreboding shadow loomed. Bosco, the feared fighter at school, confronted him with cold fury. Words cut sharper than knives, accusations of bullying, of lies, of manipulation. The tension snapped like a taut wire, and before Hyung-seok could respond, fists collided. The alley erupted into chaos. Bosco's strikes were like storms, precise, merciless, each movement a testament to trained violence. Hyung-seok's instincts, honed in secret, responded automatically. Evasion, counter, strike. Time slowed and stretched. Sweat clung to skin, breath rasped in lungs, muscles screamed in resistance. The clash was violent, raw, elemental, yet beneath the fury, something awakened, an unexpected well of strength, a clarity born of survival and fear. Their battle ended with Bosco crumpled on the ground, defeated yet unwilling to acknowledge the boy's power. The victory felt hollow, heavy with unintended consequence. Hyung-seok did not revel in triumph. He only knew exhaustion, guilt, and the bitter taste of responsibility. That night, he returned home, limbs trembling, heart pounding. The scent of his mother's cooking greeted him, still warm, still fragrant. He stared silently at the food, at the woman whose hands bore the weight of hardship, whose faith in him never wavered. Strength, he realized, was not in the body he had woken up in that miraculous morning. It was in enduring, surviving, and rising again and again. Alone in his small room, he pushed himself to his limits. Push-ups, sit-ups, grueling repetitions until his body screamed, until sweat and pain blurred the world around him. He fell, rose, fell again, learning the unspoken truth. To protect those you love, to survive the cruelty of the world, one must first conquer the self. Morning sunlight spilled over the school, brushing the hallways with a muted gold glow that reflected off polished floors and shiny sneakers. Students shuffled in, carrying backpacks, coffee, and the silent weight of social expectation. Among them, some moved with lazy confidence, stretching out from late-night gaming sessions, while others prowled like predators through the hall, measuring who had the newest sneakers, the rarest accessories, and the flashiest designer labels. Every glance, every murmur, every sideways look was a quiet declaration of status. Park Hyung-suk moved through this world like a ghost in someone else's skin. His tall, flawless body drew stares, but his face betrayed nothing but calm observation. Around him, petty rivalries erupted in whispers and stifled laughter. Two students clashed over shoes, each accusing the other of copying their style, while others couldn't stop marveling at the rare brands someone had managed to acquire, shoes impossible to find, watches that had once graced a pop star's wrist, and rings dripping from 5 fingers like liquid silver. It was a display of wealth, taste, and power, the kind that made ordinary students feel small and inadequate. Everyone noticed the newcomer, whose quiet aura and precise movements seemed almost regal. Chrome hearts rings caught the light, and a limited edition Hublot watch gleamed on his wrist, its value whispered in hushed tones by awed classmates. He carried himself with subtle confidence, hands tucked neatly, posture perfect, face serene, yet he never sought attention. He was a mystery everyone wanted to unravel, a prince who had wandered into a battlefield of sneakers and egos, leaving the usual social hierarchy in disarray. Rumors of fights lingered like a storm cloud. Bosco, a feared fighter whose presence alone could silence a room, had lost a recent duel and was conspicuously absent from school. His cryptic, jumbled messages suggested he was struggling with vision or mobility, leaving his friends anxious and unsettled. Orders to lay low seemed to conflict with the impulses of those around him. 4 students decided to defy his guidance, plotting to confront the newcomer, to assert dominance before he became untouchable. It was a delicate tension. Every glance, every whispered plan carried the potential for violence. Hyung-suk navigated these currents carefully, aware that his new body gave him both power and vulnerability. His voice, deeper and steadier, betrayed nothing of the awkward, overweight boy he once was. Even phone conversations required precision. One misstep, one slip of inflection could reveal the truth. That day, he pondered the peculiarity of his upcoming birthday, his first away from his mother, and the first time he would receive gifts from someone besides her. There was a strange thrill in this, a warmth tempered by uncertainty, as if even small gestures of kindness might vanish like smoke. In the cafeteria, he deliberately sat with students who were considered outsiders, drawing confused and envious stares from the rest of the class. The whispers were immediate. Why would someone so polished, so popular, associate with these losers? Were they friends, pawns, or something else? Entirely. Hyung-suk remained silent, observing, noting the subtle hierarchies forming around him, the admiration for his style, the jealousy for his wealth and charm, the suspicion in the eyes of those who sought to exploit or belittle him. The day unfolded as a chessboard of micro-battles. Students mocked his supposedly cheap shoes and worn backpack, but they failed to recognize that appearances could be deceptive. Even the looming threat of confrontation, the planned lesson to humble him, was powerless against his quiet awareness. He understood strategy, timing, and perception in a way the others did not. Every student who tried to manipulate him was merely a piece moving according to a game he had only just begun to understand. Later, at home, the duality of his life became even more apparent. He balanced the excitement of gifts, conversations with friends, and mundane parental concerns against the tension of school politics. Each action, each gesture, carried weight. Even a simple birthday present became a symbol of connection and growth, a fragile reminder that kindness existed in a world ruled by appearance and envy. and as evening fell, the tension lingered like a shadow. Hyung-suk's beauty, wealth, and mysterious aura had not only drawn admiration, but also envy, suspicion, and the promise of future conflicts. Beneath the surface of fashion, social hierarchies, and teenage bravado, a quiet storm was building, one that only he could navigate, and only he could survive. The stage was set, the players were in motion, and the real game had only just begun. The morning sun spilled into the city streets, warm yet harsh, illuminating the small, anxious faces of students and dreamers alike. Inside a cramped audition room, the boy named Kwa trembled at the edge of the stage, clutching his notebook like a lifeline. Every fiber of him longed to be heard, to have his story recognized, but the panel of judges barely glanced at him. Their disinterest was palpable, a suffocating wall of apathy. They had already made their choice, leaving him invisible once again. Even when he tried to plead for a chance, their dismissive gestures told him he didn't belong. Walking away, Kwa felt the sting of rejection like a physical wound, the world around him oppressive and cruel. Yet even as he trudged through the crowded streets, a spark refused to die inside him. He began writing, scribbling lyrics that clawed at his soul. Each word was a rebellion, a scream against the injustice of being ignored. His lyrics spoke of being unseen, of being judged by appearances, of pouring out pain that no one wanted to hear. Each line was raw, unpolished, but infused with a relentless honesty. At school, the harsh reality continued. Wealthy classmates whispered about their connections, their future security, and their imagined power. They scoffed at Kwa's persistence, mocking the audacity of a boy they considered beneath them. Yet in small moments, kindness surfaced, like the memory of Hyung-suk stepping in to protect Kwa from a bully, a fleeting reminder that compassion could exist even in a cruel world. Lunch brought a stark contrast to the chaos of school halls. Kwa's grandmother's food stall was a haven, smelling of simmering curry and freshly baked cookies. The warmth of the place embraced him, and her generosity was boundless. She fed him and his friends without hesitation, offering more than just sustenance, a quiet dignity, a small sanctuary from the relentless judgment of peers. Kwa felt a mix of gratitude and guilt. Here was someone who gave freely, yet the world outside remained merciless. Back in the classroom, the bullying resumed. Derisive laughter, cruel names, and the snide observations of classmates attempted to crush his spirit. Each insult was a weight pressing down, yet Kwa refused to bow. He continued writing lyrics, crafting verses from the fragments of frustration, rejection, and longing. Pain became his muse. In the quiet corners of his mind, he envisioned a stage, a microphone, and an audience that would finally listen not just to his voice, but to his heart. Meanwhile, Hyung-suk navigated the tension between his two identities, the old self, invisible and ridiculed, and the new self, commanding and enviable. He observed the bullying, the petty hierarchies, the invisible chains of power that bound the weak to the ground. No matter how much his body changed, the patterns of cruelty persisted. He realized that appearances could shield him, but they could not change the harsh truths of human behavior. Tensions erupted in fleeting conflicts, trays clattering, words thrown like daggers, alliances forming between Ginsong, Bosco, and Eugene. Hyung-suk stepped in cautiously, aware that any misstep could escalate the chaos. Beneath the noise, he recognized the universal truth Kwa was discovering. Suffering was not unique to him, but it could be channeled into strength. And then came the fragile, trembling moment of hope. Kwa, despite being dismissed and mocked, approached Hyung-suk with a daring request to sing together at the festival. The world seemed to pause. The audacious dream of performing once a distant, impossible fantasy suddenly felt tangible. Two boys, both bearing the invisible scars of cruelty and struggle, stood at the threshold of possibility. A stage awaited them, not merely as a venue, but as a place to speak truths long ignored. In that shared silence, an unspoken understanding passed between them. This was more than performance. It was defiance. It was hope. It was the first glimmer of recognition in a world that had too often turned away. The streets outside remained indifferent, the school halls relentless, but inside their minds, music began to bloom raw, defiant, and alive. Pain and hope coexisted, mingling into lyrics that could pierce the ears and hearts of anyone who dared to listen. Morning light eased into the cramped apartment like an apologetic visitor. The air trembled with the ordinary smells of laundry and cooking oil, punctuated by the rustle of old newspapers stacked in corners to keep out moisture and polish windows. In that modest clutter stood a tall, chiseled presence who belonged to a different world, glossy, effortless, and, suddenly, the center of everyone's attention. He carried the sort of calm confidence that made the room feel both smaller and somehow brighter. The newcomer's arrival turned an ordinary practice session into something close to a revelation. The song that had once been a lonely, spare melody found wings when rearranged and filled out. What had been a fragment became a fuller, warmer piece through unexpected collaboration. One boy's raw, earnest singing blended with another's careful rap and compositional tweaks, and the result sounded like possibility itself. The shabby apartment, its newspaper tricks for preserving vegetables, the grandmother's busy shifts and thrift-hardened habits, all of it seemed to hum with a new energy, as if the music were smoothing the edges of their difficult lives. Practical kindness threaded through the scene. Tips for saving electricity and keeping potatoes from sprouting were traded as matter-of-factly as vocal advice. A grandmother's hospitality insistence on offering food, tea, throat remedies anchored the meeting in warmth. The younger boy's gratitude and awkward politeness contrasted with the other's refined manners and surprising knowledge of melody and composition. There was delight in technical craft, a rough sketch that promised more after mixing and mastering, a lyricist's instincts, and the consideration that performance needed to be approached without injuring delicate vocal cords. Practice schedules were negotiated around part-time shifts and school hours. Lunches became precious windows for rehearsal. Beneath the music, a quieter current flowed the ache of past humiliations and the fragile scaffolding of friendship. Confessions about being bullied, of faces dunked in toilets and being used as punching bags made the round and left a weight behind. Those shared wounds formed the grounds for empathy. A transfer student's kindness had already begun to change the dynamics, stopping tormentors in their tracks and offering simple things like invitations to sit together at lunch. Apologies were exchanged without fanfare. Accountability and the courage to show up mattered more than sentences spoken. Ambition arrived in practical form. A music professional had listened and called the high school festival a testing ground. If the crowd loved the song, it could become a debut, a slippery, intoxicating promise of money, status, and escape from scarcity. The idea of a future where doors opened with a chord became a combustible fuel for late afternoons and stolen practice slots. Yet experienced eyes cautioned restraint. 2 weeks until the festival was little time to refine technique, and memorization, not excessive strain, became the immediate goal. There's an unspoken understanding that sincerity could carry them far, but it needed polish to survive the bright lights. Moments of tenderness punctuated the drive toward performance. Remedies for sore throats were handed over like talismans. Spontaneous improvisations in the intro elicited awe. Pride and disbelief shimmered when progress revealed itself faster than expected. One boy's insistence that the other was like him, a mirror in temperament if not in circumstance, tightened the bond between them into something equal parts admiration and kinship. The revelation that the same cruel bullies haunted both of their pasts erased old hierarchies and made them allies by default. But the town's darker social currents remained. Rival students watched and schemed, determined to undermine anyone who threatened their place in the pecking order. Jealous whispers and physical intimidation simmered. Orders to rough someone up were barked and obeyed. The idea of piggybacking off a transfer student's popularity drew thin smiles from competitors and threats of violence from those who saw reputation as territory to be defended. In response, an uneasy mix of resolve and fear circulated among the protagonists. They trained harder, revised lyrics, and rehearsed new rap sections, all while bracing for the possibility of confrontation. As the festival's performance list was revealed, strategy became part of the art. The desire to headline, to go last, and leave an audience stunned mingled with a calculation about how rivals might react. Confidence sat alongside arrogance in the other students' plotting, and the protagonists understood that winning would require more than talent. It would need nerve, timing, and a little luck. By the time evening shadows gathered, practice had transformed from tentative sessions into purposeful preparation. The boys left the apartment carrying more than sheet music. They carried burgeoning belief, the weight of family sacrifices, scars from old fights, and the palpable knowledge that, in 2 weeks, a single performance might tilt their lives. The air was alive with the smell of rehearsed breath and the small, stubborn hope that sincerity set to a rearranged melody could become the ticket out of anonymity and into a new world. The morning sun spilled across the bustling streets outside J1 High, catching the gleam of a sleek foreign car as it rolled slowly to a stop. Whispers rippled through the students like electricity. Its passenger was someone remarkable, someone out of place in their everyday world. Heads turned, and curious eyes followed every subtle movement. Attention hung in the air, the kind that made hearts race and imaginations run wild. Inside the school, preparations were underway for a festival that promised excitement, competition, and spectacle. The fashion design class opened the doors to their clothing store, revealing racks of bold, eclectic outfits. Each piece seemed to carry a personality of its own, daring anyone who entered to experiment, transform, and stand out. Among the students, admiration mingled with envy. This was a place where style was power, and the right look could captivate anyone. Outside, the world of arm wrestling and small bets created a competitive hum. Participants challenged each other with daring stares and swift moves, hoping to prove themselves in under a minute. Money exchanged hands, yet respect was the real prize. Nearby, a young man adjusted his stance, his movements precise, his reflexes quick, his mind sharper than most gave him credit for. It was clear he was no ordinary student. Each block, each guard, each reaction hinted at hidden talent, waiting for the right moment to explode. Chaos briefly erupted as a confrontation broke out. One student's aggression met with unexpected skill and calm, leaving the aggressor stunned. Observers held their breath, impressed by the speed, balance, and sheer natural ability on display. The fight was over almost as quickly as it had begun, leaving a charged energy in the air. Allies and strangers alike reassessed him. This was someone intriguing, someone unpredictable. As the festival's main stage lit up, nerves and anticipation intertwined. Young performers, usually confined to practice rooms, now faced a crowd whose attention could either crush or elevate them. Among them was a student whose voice carried the weight of determination. Every note he sang was measured, yet raw with emotion, resonating far beyond mere technique. He drew on personal feelings, imagining someone he loved, pouring sincerity into every chord. The audience responded, initially skeptical, but gradually captivated by the authenticity and passion that radiated from him. Even seasoned performers acknowledged his talent. The effect was undeniable. In another corner of the festival, rivalries simmered. Some students' confidence faltered, their egos bruised by the undeniable truth that skill and heart often outweighed superficial appearances. Yet, in the midst of tension and competition, small acts of kindness and recognition emerged. A shared meal, a helping hand, or even a simple gesture reminded everyone that friendship and support could transcend appearances. As the festival wound down, the climax arrived with a duet performance, a perfect blend of voice, emotion, and stage presence. The audience was enthralled, and a hush of awe followed each chorus. The performance left lasting impressions, not just on the crowd, but on those watching from the sidelines, who realized that raw talent could not be ignored, no matter the facade or the disguise. Afterward, as celebrations spilled into the evening, the students reflected. For some, the day had been about proving themselves, testing limits, or asserting dominance. For others, it was about discovery, realizing that appearances could deceive, that skill could emerge from unexpected places, and that passion and perseverance often outshone superficial charm. The day had shifted perspectives subtly but profoundly, leaving everyone changed in ways both visible and invisible. As night settled, a quiet sense of anticipation lingered. Faces familiar and new, talent recognized and yet untested, created an undercurrent of excitement for what was to come. The festival had ended, but the story of rivalry, discovery, and unexpected brilliance was only just beginning.